6 chapters of that, chapter 30 and 5. On the overnight train ride to Kolkata, Prabhupada could not rest because of two drunken men in the next compartment. Throughout the night, they were howling and addressing each other. "Oh, Dr. Mukherjee, oh, Mr. Chatterjee." Prabhupada remarked with disgust that these were the names of Bengali Brahmana families, but that now they had become drunkards. Jagannath Puri, he said, had been a holy place for thousands of years, but within a few years it would be so no longer. People were using Puri as a seaside resort for recreation. People like Dr. Mukherjee and Mr. Chatterjee, who had no understanding of spiritual life. As the train pulled into Howrah station, Prabhupada sat for a few minutes before disembarking. The vendors' loud cries of "Chai, Chai" punctuated the overall din of humanity and machines. This modern society, Prabhupada sighed. It is very painful to even see their faces. They're fallen so much. By seeing their faces, you become polluted. Last night they disturbed so much, and they think they are happy. They're enjoying life. But we have to take the risk, said Satsarup, to go and preach. Yes, said Prabhupada. If you are engaged in preaching, you are not affected. Sometimes yogis go to the Himalayas just to avoid seeing the face of the vicious persons. They practice yoga in a sacred and solitary place. Otherwise, what is this? Simply chai, 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 and cigarette, bidi, talking nonsense, drinking. Yet, the Vedic system is still in India. In the morning, they take bath in the villages. In the cities also, at least those who come from the village. You will find in Bombay many poor men are taking bath early in the morning. Who have seen? They will wash their floor, take bath. With fond thoughts of the pure life in the Vedic village, Srila Prabhupada left the station, passing through the crowds and the noise. He knew Kolkata well, better than any of his disciples. The poverty, chaos, and political slogans did not faze him. It was his hometown, but he had no mundane connections there. He was coming only for a few days to preach, then on to Mayapur. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter number 13, and text number 15. Manasvino Nirjita Diggajendra. Manasvino Nirjita Diggajendra. Manasvino Nirjita Diggajendra. Mamiti Sarve Bhuvi Bada Vaira. Mameti Sarve Bhuvi Bada Vaira. Mameti Sarve Bhuvi Bada Vaira. Mride Shayiran Na Tu Tad Vrajanti. Mride Shayiran Na Tu Tad Vrajanti. Mrideshairanatu tat vrajanti yan nyasta dando gata vairo biyati yan yasta dando gata vairo biyati yan yasta dando gata vairo biyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Vridesha irannata natu tadvrajanti Yan yastadando gata vaira bhyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Rideshayirannata natu tadvrajanti Yan yastadando gatai vairabhyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Yan yastadando gata vairabhyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Yan yastadando gata vairabhyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Hrideshayirannatu tadvrajanti Yan yastadando gata vairabhyati Manasvino nirjita digajendra Mameti sarve bhuvi bada vaira Hrideshayirannatu tadvrajanti Yan yastadando gata vairabhyati Manasvina very great heroes, mental speculators. Nirjita Dik Gajendra, who have conquered many other heroes as powerful as elephants. Mama, my land, my country, my family, my community, my religion. Iti, thus, Sarve, all, great political, social, and religious leaders Bhuvi, in this world, Badavaira, who have created enmity among themselves, Mirite, in battle, Shairan, fell dead on the ground, Na, not, Tu, but, Tat, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vrajanti, approach, Yat, which, Nyastadanda, a sannyasi, Gatavaira, who has no enmity throughout the whole world, Abhiyati, attains that perfection. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. There were and are many political and social heroes who have conquered enemies of equal power. Yet, due to their ignorance in believing that the land is theirs, they fight one another and lay down their lives in battle. They are not able to take up the spiritual path accepted by those in the renounced order. Although they are big heroes and political leaders, they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization. Report. Big political leaders might be able to conquer equally powerful political enemies, but unfortunately, they cannot subdue their strong senses. The enemies that always accompany them, not being able to conquer these nearby enemies, they simply try to conquer other enemies, and ultimately they die in the struggle for existence. They do not take to the path of spiritual realization or become sannyasis. Sometimes these big leaders take up the guise of a sannyasi and call themselves Mahatmas, but their only business is conquering their political enemies because they spoil their lives with the illusion of this is my land and my family. They cannot progress spiritually and attain liberation from the clutches of Maya. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yatkripa tamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam By the mercy of spiritual master, blind man can see the stars, lame man can cross the mountains, and dumb man can speak eloquently. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances and lotus feet of my spiritual master. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishta Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Desha Tarini. So the translation again. There were and are many political and social heroes who have conquered enemies of equal power, yet, due to their ignorance in believing that the land is theirs, they fight one another and lay down their lives in battle. They are not able to take up the spiritual path accepted by those in the renounced order. Although they are big heroes and political leaders, they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, the last text, we believe, that, and Prabhupada calls this a peace formula, that by accepting that Krishna is the supreme proprietor, supreme enjoyer, and supreme friend, then the peace in human society can be established. And until and unless we come to this point, there will be so much reason to fight. Because by coming to this material world, spirit soul wants to be enjoyer and proprietor. Whatever he sees, this is the nature of bodily identification. It as we read in this purport, this bodily identification starts from very childhood. As soon as we are born, the soul enters the womb and grows up, and as soon as it's born, then the relatives are waving at the child, hello, how are you, and in various ways look after that little body, and as soon as that little baby grows up to some extent, then it starts watching at the mirror, and this is me, and the parents start dressing, and it's kind of it becomes a center of attention for quite a good while, and you can see that the small children, they actually love it. They really enjoy to get that attention. Sometimes they actually, they say, like a 2 years old is considered like a teenage years, I think, of a childhood. So they will pull the various types of tantrums and etc. They kind of testing, how far they can go. I mean, this is what Sharanga told me. I don't know about the subject matter too much, but a few parents mentioned, including Sharanga. So they put some tantrum, they test, like how far they can get away with, and etc. So it's quite an interesting time. And sometimes they get some tantrum or screaming or something to get some attention. So the soul in this material body is trying to attract and get that attention. And then the child is giving some toys, and this is my this is my doll, this is my little car, this is my Lego, I'm building this. And sometimes you can see children fighting with each other in a playground. No, this is my toy. No, I saw it first, etc. Whoever runs first to the toy, that is mine. And there is like this battle. So this proprietorship all starts with me. I am this body, and then everything in relationship with this body is mine. Is called I-ness and minus, ahamamati. So this is the nature of the material illusion. And as we grow up, our body gets bigger, and then our toys also become bigger, larger, more valuable. Like it becomes phones. This is my phone. Various types of dresses, various types of gadgets. So you start that I-ness and minus, the sense of the self, it starts expanding and growing more and more, becomes bigger, bigger and bigger. And then, this is my car. And you can see that proprietorship is so strong in identification. You like, there's a thing called road rage. Anybody seen it? Anybody? We are in a road rage. Get out of my way. Do you see where you're going? Or like if you're in a big city and you're for the first time and you don't know where to go, and just for 2 seconds you're trying to find out where is the next turn. You'll be beep beep from the back, and they will, what you doing, you stopping me, like you stopped me for 1 second, I wasted 1 second time. It's like a get out of my way. Especially it's a big car, they will just press on accelerator. It's like this whole kind of ego game. Look, this is my car. Get out of my way. I'm driving with a big car. Who are you with your Volkswagen? Or go back to your country or something like that. Go back to Lithuania. you know this is in my country. So yeah, then it expands. This is my car or the house. You can see there's so much starting from childhood competition with these toys and the dolls and the little cars and the Lego, and then the sand castles, and then growing a little bit larger. This is this is my gadget. My gadget is better than yours, and then the car, and then this is my house. And the next thing, build a castle. Then the next goal becomes, when you hit, after you got education and you enter the workforce, then the next big target for your life is to build a house and to build your empire and to build your nice garden, and etc. And this is mine. Come to my house, come to my garden. I show you my garden. And you become so the sense of I-ness is just expands. In the beginning, is this little tiny baby, is nothing. It's shaking this shaker. Shake, 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 shake. This is my shaker. And then that I-ness and minus grows with all the gadgets, with all the cars, with all them, etc. And then you go further along, it goes beyond just that identification, and bodily identification goes beyond. And this is my profession. I'm like a better than anybody else. I got this great education, or I'm like a big as this in my streets. I'm the biggest that in my village. I'm big as this. And there's so much competition, so much fighting to get into this expand my influence, expand. This is the soul's perverted nature, trying to, just like Krishna is the supreme proprietor. So our material conditioning, that stemming from bodily identification, is to imitate Krishna, to increase my influence, to increase my power, to increase my properties, and you become so attached to them. And then it goes, the profession, the professional influence, getting to the top, stepping on other people's heads. So how you can be peaceful, is always that big competition. And then next thing is the country. And my Lithuania is the best country in the world. This little country, with 3 million people, Lithuania is the best country in the world. Yeah, or the best basketball is the top three in the world in basketball, or or like any England, we are the best. We are the best. Or Scotland, we are the best country in the world. So this is bodily identification. We identify my country or my birth is the best. And why we think like that? If the country is the best, that means I am the best. That means my nationality is better than yours. And we claim there's various types of liberation movements to bring the equality, and we are the citizens of this world. But we can see again and again and again, despite of this external adjustment of bring the equality deep inside, as soon as there is something deep inside, this sense of superiority comes out. Get the foreigners out. Get the foreigners out. Leave the European Union. It's all bodily conception. And then the countries, can see some countries or cities. Another, I'm speaking about countries, cities. There's an enmity. My city is the best, better. I don't know whether. Yeah, it's the same here in Scotland. The first city and the second. The capital and the second city. There's always competition. Or in my country as well, the capital and the second city. There's always competition. I'm from this city. The village, village competition. My village is better than yours. If you call it a time, I Jai. Or then some countries, they always keep enmity with each other. This country and that country, this influence zone and that influence zone. So you can see this sense of proprietorship starting from bodily identification. It expands into my village, my family, my country, etc. That sense of ego, bodily identification expands into this many different aspects, and it becomes so big. Our ego becomes so big. Or we're watching the football match. Oh, my country just won the game. You were just sitting, at your TV, drinking beer. What did you contribute it? What there was a few guys, they're running after the ball, they kicked in it, they were training from the childhood, and you're sitting at your TV drinking beer and say, my country has won. You can see it's illusionary. This bodily identification is illusionary. You didn't want anything. You were just sitting doing nothing, and now my country has won. In the football, in the Olympic Games, there was a guy who was running, preparing for all his life, running and won a gold medal. Yes, my country got a gold medal. You didn't get anything. You were just sitting, on your chair. You didn't run anywhere. Your ego is running. My country, or what actually means I am, the best. My country is the best. So it expands into all those different types. And then there is so much then fighting. My country is this. I try to, and these various social and political heroes, they were fighting in their playground, building the castles, and he came, destroyed another castle, and felt that insecurity, and then they grow up, they're dissatisfied. Actually, the hearts are missing something, ultimately missing Krishna and Krishna's love. So they're trying to fill that gap with more and more and more. And there is like various countries fighting with each other, and etc. And then various political and social leaders create enmity with each other, and also economical. That's another thing. The economical fighting is the latest kind of invention. For many centuries, they used to fight, over like a land and etc. But now it's just like who can have a economical influence over others, and with the banking, various types of tricks and loans and etc., increasing that influence more and more and more. So this is called the struggle, trying to lord it over material nature. The tiny, insignificant soul coming to this material world, taking birth and identifying with the body, is trying to lord it over material nature. This is the illusion. And as we can see, they're never satisfied. They're always battling. They're always fighting, and they create so many enemies. There's so many enemies. However, what they fail to conquer in those battles is their own senses. Their senses remain wild, uh, and this is where this battling is coming from. I want more and more and more, and in terms of influence, in terms of power, and I'm never satisfied. And you can see the greatest leaders of the world, while they increase their powers more and more and more, they failed to conquer their senses. And one cannot be even a proper leader and properly care for people unless the senses are controlled and conquered. Because if they are not, that means your motivation is not to care for the people. The number one priority of a leader as a kshatriya is to give protection and create a culture and create a situation and protection so that people are protected. There is a spiritual culture, there is a security, and etc. If your senses are uncontrolled, you cannot expect a protection. That means there is a personal motivation in that leadership. What I can gain for myself, how I can increase my own wealth, how I can increase my own influence, and how I can enjoy more and more and more. The senses are demanding for enjoyment and for gratification. So therefore, you cannot be trusted like nowadays as well. Like a people point, oh, this is you cannot trust the politics, you cannot trust politicians, etc. And it is true, and it's not surprising. They very well identify the disease. That disease is there, that selfishness and self motivation and etc. is there, to a smaller or larger extent. But it's not surprising because the senses are uncontrolled. So unless and until people start experiencing the happiness that is not coming from the senses can never be satisfied. They're always burning like fire, uh, because that's the nature of the senses. The soul is looking unlimited happiness, is getting a little pleasure through the senses, and it becomes so addicted, so obsessed to enjoy through the senses. So unless and until the senses are controlled and a person derives happiness from other source, then the senses, there's gonna be a problem. There's gonna be a fighting. Who will get more sense gratification? Who will get more power? Who will get more enjoyment? So that's why the peace formula is to understand that ultimate proprietor of everything is Krishna, ultimate enjoyer of everything is Krishna, and we are secondary proprietor and a secondary enjoyer that Krishna has given us as our quota. He says, okay, everything belongs to him, but he's giving you, and it is meant to be used in his loving service. And he is the supreme enjoyer, so everything we use in his service. And then we also, enjoy, because there is no greatest happiness than to see Krishna happy. That's the greatest happiness there is in entire creation is when Krishna is happy, when to see Krishna happy. And it's described in Charitamrita that happiness is millions and trillions times more than any material gratification coming from the senses. Because soul is looking for something unlimited, and that's why it's become so addicted to sense gratification, because it's getting a few glimpses and becomes addicted to those few glimpses. So therefore, the real master, the real winner is a person who can conquer the senses. When the senses are, and this is called Swami or Goswami. Go means senses, and Swami means the master. As I mentioned here, sannyasi or renunciate means a person who has conquered the wild senses, and it's only possible to do that by taking shelter of the ultimate master of the senses, Hrishikesha. Uh, uh, Hri means senses and Isha means master. So there is a beautiful verse from Padyavali of Rupa Goswami. It says, beaten by 100 whips of material sufferings, the horse of my mind runs widely on the bad road of the senses. O Lord Madhava, please pull up the reins of devotional service. Stop the horse and tie it to the post of your lotus feet. So unless we engage those wild senses, crazy, and we don't, it's not the solution is to stop, because some people realize it, by so many addictions coming from senses, sex addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and more or less, or sugar addiction or sweet addiction, all sorts of things people become addicted due to wild senses. And it's not necessarily comes up to the stage of that, you need a professional help, but still there is various types of addictions and obsessions, so money and etc., greed, all sorts of things people become addicted. And it's just burning and burning, and that was why it's called forest fire, because the desire is just burning, disturbing. How you can be peaceful with all these senses being dissatisfied? But when and some philosophy, and it causes so much misery. So when you become addicted, it's so much misery, and when you don't get what you want, it's so much misery, so much suffering, as we in this verse we just read. Beaten, the horses get beaten by the sufferings, hundreds of sufferings, running on the road of rocky road of the senses. You want, there is always price to pay for any gratification. For sexual gratification, for example, to produce one drop of semen, it takes 40 drops of blood. So you're losing your vital force, you're losing your brain practically. It's called brain drain. Sex life is a directly brain drain. So running, and then when you don't get what you want, there's so much anger, so much frustration, so much upset, so much unhappiness. So then some philosophies say, just give up all the senses and go meditate. But the senses are so wild, and in this, especially in this age of Kali, extremely wild. Senses totally uncontrolled. Just any little disturbance to sense enjoyment is so much upset, and so much disturbance. So it's not a way really to stop the senses, because if you go to meditate to Himalayas, as I mentioned, I believe somewhere we read here or in the Lamrita, you may go to the Himalayas to meditate, but you're gonna take your senses with you, and you're taking your mind with you. So you may trying to meditate and bring your mind, but your senses are demanding. When I gonna get to see this thing? All your life you've been feeding your eyes, with sense objects. You're feeding your tongue with sense objects. Your sense of touch, your ears and tongue. You've been feeding. So how are you gonna go to Himalayas and suddenly stop it? The senses will go wild, will demand. Uh, so therefore, it's not the way to go. To just to give up as well. That's not the way to go. Is to engage senses in the service of master of the senses. So like we are dancing, we are taking prasadam that is offered to Krishna, we're smelling the flowers, which actually we are a bit difficult at the moment with pandemic. Hopefully we're gonna revive soon. Smelling the flowers offered to Krishna, uh, oil, is incense, is a festival of senses, but is all in connection to Krishna. It's the regulating senses, regulating sense gratification, and rising our consciousness to a higher state. And so we're still using our senses, but not in a way that degrades us, but in a way that purifies us, in a way that uplifts us. And by conquering those senses, then we can become a true friend. Without conquering the senses, and nobody can be trusted. no matter how good friend can be, because the sense is gonna, at some point can, take away. Take away. You can see there is various breakdowns happens due to the senses, like like in a modern society, people just like so let their senses wild. So the family unit is breaking down because at any time, and people feel so much insecurity as well. At any time, your partner may just run away with someone due to uncontrolled senses. Whether it's a female or male, because until those senses are in control, and this is what spiritual life means, and living in a temple or practicing at home, this is what you're trying to do, experience the higher taste. So there's a two battles there. One battle is to actually uh, to refrain to some extent from that some gratification. Certain things we engage in Krishna service, and certain things we refrain or keep a certain distance, because you will tell you in a 12 steps program as well that there's a two things you need to do. One is you avoid the contact, or minimize or reduce the contact with the sense object. And the second point is to get a higher taste. Unless you replace with something better, and there is always a danger, because you are controlling the senses. You withdraw your senses, but the taste for sense object remains. In 255, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 55. You withdraw your senses, but the taste for sense object remains. But by experiencing the higher taste, one can master those senses. And then eventually, those senses is like Prabhupada explains, like a cobra with poison has been removed. Is no more causing any problem. So these two things has to be done, and that's why some people like I feel like it's a little bit of a battle when they come to the the modern person comes to the temple and see the ladies is on one side, the man is on the other side, and etc. This is actually, and people, some people say maybe this is like a sexist or something thing, but no, it's actually it's opposite. It's not looking at other person as a sense object, but actually that means you are dealing with that, or looking at somebody else as a sense object. Because unless you conquered your senses and you realized fully that you're not this body, you're a spirit soul, is 100% you're going to look at somebody else as a sense object to higher or smaller degree. And if you look at yourself, unless while you still consider your body an ultimate source of pleasure and gratification, how are you going to expect that anybody else look at your body as not that? You're expecting, it's like there's some people who like are really disturbed, and obviously it is a big problem, because for example, women's body has been extremely objectified, over the last, and is used in every way, to promote businesses and etc., promote items and so on. So it's not surprised that there is a disturbance, who likes to be seen as an object rather than a person. It is very disturbing. It is not pleasurable. But at the same time, you have to take also responsibility, unless and until, if I am consider my body the source of pleasure and enjoyment, how I can expect other people not to look at that? And it is a law of nature. If you overemphasize your own body as a source of enjoyment in your own life, and you will attract people who will look at your body as well as an object. And if you emphasize of developing spiritual qualities, awakening yourself as a soul, then naturally you're going to attract people in your life who are also going to look at you as a soul and will look at your body. So you have to look as well at this point, if we are disturbed by other people looking at us, as an object, as an object, maybe we also need to look as well. Am I looking at my body as well as an object? Also, so therefore, in Krishna consciousness, everything is there, and the culture in me looks like very unusual and even shocking or disturbing in the modern eyes of, you know, wild sense gratification, everything goes. But actually, the whole culture is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. So if you know, like a ladies in a temple is on one side and men is on another side, is not actually sexist. It actually helps. That means the people are moving away from looking at other people as objects. Is trying to deal with that attachment. Is trying to deal, and first dealing is maybe there a little bit of distance, at least in a temple room. That you want to create an atmosphere of non-sensual, no kind of vibes, or minimize the vibes, and etc. So creating an atmosphere, so reducing that attachment. But ultimately, the ultimate solution is, of course, experiencing higher taste, developing love of Krishna. But it only happens that bodily concept becomes completely removed in very, very high stages of spiritual life. So we should not get disturbed, if people will look at us to some extent as an object, because ultimately body is an object. The soul body is a dress, and therefore there will be a certain degree of that. Only people who will reach the completely spiritual platform will look at you as a soul purely and completely. It is the battle of the whole life actually to raise above this bodily concept of life. So we shouldn't expect, sometimes people expect there's going to be some psychological adjustment, and we're just going to battle, with the big, placards, and have a big arrangement, and write many books, and that kind of problem gonna disappear. Yes, the problem it is because of identification with the body, because the soul has identified with the body. That's why it's there, and then therefore there is a way to deal with it. It's just through external psychological adjustment. The problem won't disappear. The overall problem can all be resolved on a spiritual platform, and there is a two aspects to it. Is the purification that comes, that one, and also in the beginning, one may keep some distance from the object of the senses. So, and by experiencing higher taste, ultimately one becomes purified from that bodily identification. Only on that platform is possible to raise, above this idea of, looking at others as object of gratification. And we need very powerful process and experience higher taste as quick as possible. We need to come to the platform of higher taste, very seriously chanting Hare Krishna. That's the ultimate solution, is to chant very good Hare Krishna Maha Mantra rounds, and then we're gonna raise above the bodily platform. So, are there any quick question or comment? Yeah. Doubts or challenges? Yeah, run out of time. You have something? Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the Srimad Bhagavatam class. That's another way to raise above bodily platform, is to hear more and more and more. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande.